Welcome to Holley Terminator X Training Part 15. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at working with our fuel modifier tables that we have available to program. Now, our fuel modifiers are going to be things like our coolant temp enrichment. That's going to be providing a certain amount of additional fuel as the engine starts from a cold state and starting to warm up. We're also going to be taking a look at our manifold air temp compensation. That's going to allow us to compensate for the variation in air density between different ambient temperatures. We're going to have a lot to cover here. Let's jump into our video so we can check out how to work with our fuel modifiers.
Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at setting up and working with our fuel modifier tables in our Holley Terminator X software. This is going to be our coolant temp enrichment table as well as our air temp enrichment table. We're going to be using these to offset whatever's coming from our base fuel table, whether it's going to be a fuel flow rate or speed density strategy, or it's a volumetric efficiency base fuel strategy. We'll find that the base fuel table, if we jump in here to our fuel ICF under base fuel, we'll find that this table represents the fuel delivery to an engine under steady state airflow, so not having rapid throttle movements, just going in and having nice gradual airflow and throttle inputs. It's also going to represent the fuel delivery to the engine under the engine coming up to normal operating conditions. So at least 160 to about 220 degrees. That's the range that we're typically going to find a internal combustion engine is going to run in. Now in that range, the engine is warmed up, the intake manifold's warmed up, the throttle body's warmed up. As we spray fuel into a warm engine, the fuel atomizes properly, meaning as it sprays out of the injector, it's going to get into the engine as efficiently as possible because it atomizes and it mixes with the air charge that's coming into the engine. Now, when we're dealing with an engine that's cold, so an engine that's at something like maybe ambient temperature, it's sat overnight, when it fires off, the fuel coming out of the injector is not going to atomize very well. It's actually going to be trying to trickle out, and it's going to stick to the intake valves and to the intake track, and it's not going to get into the engine as efficiently as possible. So on a cold engine, we need to ramp up our injector pulse width so the engine doesn't run lean and that we can overcome that wall wetting effect. That's what we're going to be using our coolant temp correction or the warm-up enrichment table for here in our software. Let's take a look at that and look at how it's going to work. So we're going to move here from our base fuel in our navigation pane and move down here under temperature enrichment. Now under temperature enrichment, we're going to find that we have our coolant temp enrichment, our air-fuel ratio offset, and our air temp enrichment. We'll be breaking down how these work. Let's talk about our coolant temp enrichment here first. This table is going to be adding a percentage of fuel against whatever it's calculating for the injector pulse width here from our main fuel table. So again, main fuel table represents steady state airflow, so no rapid throttle changes. Also engine up to operating temperature, and we have the atomization proper on the engine. So as the fuel sprays out of the injector, it's going to get into the engine. It's not going to try to stick to everything within the intake track, intake valve. Jumping back in here, this allows us to compensate for that and overcome that wall wetting effect so that the engine's going to run proper when it fires off cold and as it's warming up over time into the operating temperature. We'll notice here in the table around 160 degrees and warmer, so we can see our lower axis scale on the table. This is going to be based on engine coolant temperature. We'll find at 160 to 260 here, the values are all 100. 100 within this table means that there's 0% correction. If we have a value of something like 125 here, that means that we're adding then 25% on top of whatever's coming from our main fuel table for the calculation. The way this is going to work, we'll find whether we're in a VE style fuel strategy here or in a fuel flow rate speed density strategy, these values get turned into an injector pulse width. The injector pulse width, how long the injector is open for in order to spray fuel into the engine. Just as a generic example here, if we're taking a look at the operation right now, if we take a look, we're seeing roughly 2,000 RPM. You see the injector pulse width here is roughly 9.49 millisecond. We can see that the coolant enrichment is applying right now 110% enrichment. So if we jump back into our temp enrichment here, we can see we're actually operating right here at roughly 120 degrees. So it's adding 10% correction enrichment on top of whatever is calculated from our base table. It's very important that this base table is tuned on a warm engine. We never want to go into working with our coolant temp enrichment here, coolant temp enrichment table. We never want to go into this trying to alter the values until we've tuned the main fuel table on a warm engine. Ignore these values, get the engine up to operating temperature as quick as possible when you're firing off your project for the first time. Sort out your base tables so that at idle or part throttle, You're hitting the target area.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.